Well, Donna, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me back on your show.
Yeah, round two. I am so excited because your last book was so good. Remind me of the title.
Exit the Maze, one addiction, one cause, one solution.
Yes, that was so good. We had a great conversation and you told your story. I'll leave a link in the show notes for your first one because everyone's going to be like, oh my God, she's amazing. I want to hear more from her. So
Thank you.
we'll have a whole nother interview to share with them. But today, for those of you that are not watching YouTube, I have a book in my hands with a whole bunch of tabs on it. It's called The Healing Moment, 7 Paths to Turn Messes into Miracles of Love. I love the title.
Thank you. Thank you. I wrote it during COVID.
Another COVID book. You and Michelle Obama changing the world one book at a time.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I have lots of questions about this book. So, but I do want to, I play a little game now. I don't think we played it the first time I had you on. It's, I call it the lightning round. It's not fast, but just to front load the episode with a few resources. So when you first got into recovery, were there any books, recovery books specifically, that really helped you sort of absorb these ideas of sobriety or set you on the path?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly the Alcoholics Anonymous book is a wonderful book, and it's just rich with practical solutions to life, not just sobriety, but life. And it's also offers a road to each person to find their own spirituality. But I needed more than that. So my next book, I asked around, and there was a friend of mine who had read a lot of different things, and he recommended the book Living in the Light by Shakti Gawain. And I read that and I loved it. It was so good and so inspiring. And then,
I haven't heard, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I haven't heard anybody else mention Shakti Gawain, and I don't think ever. What was that other book that it was like creative visualization?
I'm not sure about her other book. Although I did read some books on creative visualization, but I didn't think by her.
Yeah. Okay. So she's amazing. Shakti Gawain. Well, I'm sorry. It was called Living
in the Light.
In the Light. And what did you get out of that one?
I just felt very inspired. It was a long time ago. I can't tell you what it said, but I remember I really latched onto it.
Yeah. You got sober a long time ago. When did you get sober?
1986 was the first time. Then I had a relapse after 23 years.
Oh, you did? Oh, that's right. And what was the second one?
Yeah, which was the inspiration back then, 11 years ago, for the moment, my healing moment, which when I was very upset and so many bad things had happened, and I hit another bottom, and I did relapse, and I was like so mad at God, why I've tried so hard to do all these right things and good things and therapy and spirituality and all, and why don't you love me? And it came to me so clearly that it's not me that doesn't love you. You don't love yourself. And that was my healing moment.
My God.
Yeah.
That is it, right?
Right. And I didn't even know what it meant. That was what was the really sad part. And the best part, because since I realized I didn't know what it meant, then I could begin to learn what it meant to love myself.
And what does that mean for you now?
Oh, so different. First of all, I was always trying to look for love or be the love that I thought someone else wanted. And it really has nothing to do with that. I had to start all over again. I had done all that family of origin work and dealt with my trauma, and had tons and tons of therapy and workshops, and over 13 years of psychoanalysis, another 7 or 8 years of cognitive therapy and Gestalt therapy, you name it, did it. But I really did not understand that I had to actually go back and learn how to take care of myself, as if I were a parent who loved and adored this little baby, and then this little 2-year-old, and then this little child, and this little teenager. And what would I do, knowing all that I had learned, for that young person? How would I show them that I love them? And it wouldn't be from abusing them or giving them cigarettes or alcohol or ignoring their needs or telling them to shut up or hurting them in any way, shape, or form. It would be in explaining things, not just saying do this or do that or do the right thing. Help them to understand why good choices make us feel good about ourselves. See, I believe that love is an action word, and I can't say I love anyone if I don't love myself, because I don't know how to love anyone if I don't know how to love myself. And so I had to kind of learn from that basic physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of every human being, how to provide that for myself. And what happened is my whole world just turned completely around. And rather than focusing anywhere outside of myself, I learned how to focus and source that inner place. And I found that no matter whether I was watering my flowers or at a meeting or with a patient or walking on the beach, it was all the same. I was in that place of self-love all the time and feeling good all the time, even when it was raining, literally or figuratively.
That's amazing. And it sounds like a very practical thing to do would be to shift that focus from outwards to how am I feeling now? Like checking in with your body. Like, how am I feeling in this moment? How am I feeling
Well,
in this
feeling my
moment?
feelings is very important, but it's way beyond that, like growing from them and transcending them, and not just from an intellectual perspective, but from a mental health and spiritual perspective. So some people refuse to feel their feelings at all and they stay stuck. And some people dwell on their feelings rather than saying, this is painful, this is an opportunity for growth, and how can I grow through this very unpleasant emotional experience? And once we learn how to embrace that process, we can feel all the pain in the world and still have this inner glowing, this inner knowing, and this inner state of peace within us, because we do know, after we do that a few times, that we will be grateful for that experience once the experience has transitioned us into a better place.
That's such a good point. It seems to be that we need to find this balance between acknowledging our feelings and processing them to resolution, but not live there and dwell there. Because I have found myself doing that as well, where we get so when I first got into recovery, I was like, oh my God, what are all these feelings and the family of origin stuff? It's all very fascinating. But at some point, I was like, I've been dwelling here for too long. Like, I need to move on, basically.
Right. I see people, excuse me, in recovery meetings for like children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families for, sometimes 15, 20 years. And I don't see that as progress. I don't think it's like the recovery from other addictions where you do need it forever. I mean, this is like a process of healing that inner child, and then it does get healed. If it's not getting healed, then something is missing, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things. I think addiction recovery is so tricky because it kind of just depends. Like, everybody is coming to the table with so many different variables and there's so many different influences. There really is no like one size fits all, but it sort of just kind of depends. That you need to be there as long as you need to be there, and then we need to move on and start focusing. Like,
Right.
what you focus on expands.
Right.
So we need to start focusing on cultivating things like peace and joy and
Well,
contentment.
yes, I still get triggered because
Yeah.
there's that template, I call it in my book, that template of distrust. People taught me not to trust them and not to trust myself. So when somebody does something that triggers my trust issues, I'm aware of it. I'm just not at the effect of it anymore. And now I can say something like, this doesn't ring true to me in the conversation, rather than holding in, maybe I'm misperceiving this, or my gut's telling me someone's doing something dishonest or saying something dishonest or being dishonest. This is just one example. And so my intuition will tell me something's not right. And in the past, I would have either held that in or, gotten angry. And now I don't have to do either. I can just say, this doesn't feel true to me. I don't think I'm believing you. I can even,
What an amazing thing
if
to
it's
say.
an important relationship, I can even say, I have a sensitivity and a trigger to people who kind of forget the truth or don't say it.
Hmm.
And I can understand why, but it's something that won't work for me. Dishonesty just won't work for me. So we either have to work on that together, or we have to, recognize this is not a good fit, whether it's friendship, business, romance, or whatever. It's just not a good fit for me.
Yeah, and I think language is so important, having the right words, right? We just need to know what to say, because I identify with the either silent, like stuffing it in and not saying anything, or getting angry. Like, to be able to feel like I have an opinion, I would have to get angry about it. But now one of my favorite phrases is, can you help me? Like, something doesn't feel right to me. Can you help me understand? Help me I
Yes,
feel confused. I feel confused. Can you help me
right,
understand?
right.
And
Yes.
sometimes it's just having the right language. So I appreciate any kind of language that's
And
like,
sometimes it is miscommunication or
yeah,
misperception.
yeah,
So by coming from a place of love rather than attack, it opens up the space for people to resolve
yes,
those
absolutely.
misunderstandings or miscommunications.
Um, in keeping with the lightning round, I told you it was very slow. But that, makes me think, to be able to communicate in that way, we do need to be in touch with our own feelings, right? And I feel like part of the daily self-care practice is something that contributes to helping us stay connected to ourselves so that we can communicate what we need. Do you have a daily self-care practice, or do you think
I
of it
do.
as a
I do,
weekly or
but back
okay.
back on the reactions, the self-care is about when I'm having a reaction, not acting out of that reaction, but processing it, because it always has a taproot to the past. And if there's still a strong reaction there, there's still more healing to do about my past. I can do that by just being with those feelings and letting those emotions just surface. And then once they dissipate, then I'm in a good neutral place for communication. In terms of my daily practices, I wake up in the morning and I say thank you for these wonderful covers and pillow and for fresh air. And I love seeing the sunlight come through the window and the light on the leaves. And then I always have 2 or 3 spiritual books that I'm reading. And when I get out of bed, I pray. I ask my higher power to guide me through the day. To me, my higher power is my conscience, that pipeline that lets me know I'm on the right path, or I might be veering off the wrong path. I feel like that's my telephone connection to my higher power. And I try to go out about my day being loving. I don't always succeed. Sometimes I get very frustrated, like,
Oh, you're still human?
but then I know it right away and I catch myself, and it's always easy to say, I'm sorry. But there's so many people that are in need of help and love, and to try to have that kind of consciousness throughout the day and act on it, and to remain in a state of gratitude no matter what's going on. This is a stressful time, and so we can react to it or we can be a solution, and we can either get be like firecrackers going off every time someone else does something wrong, or we can go out. I've probably done that 100 times myself, and I'm just going to try to create the space for positivity and understanding and compassion. So there's so many things. I make sure I eat healthy. I take medical care seriously. All the things that I would do for a young child, like I said before, you don't give them a cigarette and a drink every time they cry or they're upset.
That
You
would be
teach them
weird.
how to communicate their feelings in healthy ways. You
Yeah.
hug them, you nurture them, you love them, you let them know you care about them. So I try to do that for myself and others every day.
Do you still attend 12-step meetings?
Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. That's a lot of self-care,
I attend recovery meetings.
recovery meetings. Yeah. It's always, I have me personally, I have a thin veil. I will talk about 12 steps, but I don't come right out and acknowledge any kind of membership to anything. But yeah, that's okay. So thank you for sharing your self-care routine. I think a lot of people are like willing to do the work, but they don't know what the work is. And
Yeah, well, it's
so,
mind, body, and soul.
yeah.
Just like, a young child needs exercise, needs fresh air, needs friends. needs spiritual guidance. And even if it's just teaching them, if they make good decisions, they feel good about themselves. If they make bad decisions, they're going to feel bad about themselves. And when you feel bad about yourself, you're going to keep making more bad decisions. When you feel good about yourself, you're going to keep making more good decisions. And it's, the golden rule and all these things that children can be taught when they're young. And so, and then the emotional part, like we talked about earlier, kids are naturally happy if their needs are being met, their physical and mental and emotional needs. So if they're unhappy, to teach them it's okay to be sad, it's okay to cry, and to nurture them through that. And if they're angry, to also say, I understand you're angry. It's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to throw your toy at me. It's not okay to scream at me or call me names or anybody else. So find the words that tell me how you feel. And that doesn't mean you're still going to get what you want, but
Right.
but
Damn
it
it.
means I hear you and I understand you're mad at me that I won't let you go out and play before you do your homework. But that those are all about setting boundaries. And so we have to do that for ourselves as adults too. We can't just go for anything we want all the time. That will hurt us and it will hurt others.
That is such a good point, that we need to set boundaries with ourselves. I think when people talk about boundaries, we think of setting boundaries so that other people respect our space or our feelings or us, right? But I have found that the trickier part in my own life was setting boundaries for myself. Like, not, I'm one of I tend to lean on the workaholic side, and have come to understand that that's like self-abuse, right? Just grinding and pushing and denying my own needs and for the sake of working to accomplish something for external validation. It's a whole thing, but that's a good point, that we need to set boundaries and take good care of ourselves.
Yes, yes. And we do a better job when we have that downtime.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. We have so much to talk about in your book. First of all, how did you come across the Course in Miracles?
Well, I actually was talking with someone who was also in recovery. I was about 2 years sober, so this is around 1988. And we were talking about religion, and I'm like, I'd like to find a church that I could go to, but I've been to a lot of them, and I just don't. The message of, we're all sinners, and God is this judging, sorting out the sinners from the do-gooders, and it never resonated with me. I've always been interested in religion ever since I was a very young child. We didn't go to church, so I'd go to church with my friends, and I liked learning about Jesus, and I liked the Bible stories, but I did not like this message of guilt and all that. And I also didn't like it when I saw people who were so-called religious people, and then their behavior was sometimes quite bizarre. So I wanted to find some place as an adult that I could go. And she said, well, what are you looking for? I said, well, I'm looking for somebody who kind of talks about what Jesus taught, like love yourself, love one another, love
Yeah.
God. That was really the message, and it's gotten so convoluted.
Forgiveness and
And she said, oh, you
compassion.
probably like the Course in Miracles. And I said, oh, what's that? And she told me, and she said, well, where would I find that? And she said, I don't know of where you would find it, but I know they had sold the book at Unity Church. So I went and bought the book and started my own study group.
You're like me. It's like, oh, I can't find one. I'll just start my own group. Yeah. No, I found the Course in Miracles probably in my first year of recovery, and it was profoundly life-changing. I started with the lessons in the back of the book. The text was hard for me to read, so I mostly just listened to Marianne Williamson sort of interpret the text. And then that was back in the day when she had all these lectures on the Course in Miracles on cassette tape.
Yes.
Yeah, she would lecture on like success and career and relationships and money, and that was how I sort of got familiar with the text. But it wasn't until I did the lessons. At first I was like, where are they going with this? It's like the chair means nothing. I don't even remember off the top of my head, but it was interesting how one lesson kind of built on the other, and suddenly I had this mental shift that was actually very profound. And I began to realize, oh, I'm at the source. And, I feel like was boiled down to like things are either love or fear, right? And the idea is to choose love. And, whenever I'm struggling with something, it's about the meaning I'm assigning to it. And that there was actually a different perspective that was through this lens of love. And that was really mind blowing to me. So when I heard from your PR people and they said, "Oh, she wrote a new book," I was like super excited. And when I started reading it and you're referencing the Course in Miracles, I got really excited about it because it's so powerful.
It is very powerful, and a lot of people have problems with the textbook and the workbook for that matter, but mainly the textbook. But I think that it's written in such a way that forces you to say you don't know what it's saying, and that's the whole point of the course. We think we know, but we don't. So it's trying to strip away that ego that says, I know everything about everything, even though no one would say that, but that's how our thoughts operate. And so we're at the effect all the time. So when we can learn that, kind of come back into the world as a newborn baby who doesn't know what a chair is, who learns through life to give that chair meaning, and that chair only has the meaning that I give it, it changes our perception. You begin to look at a chair in a whole different way. I mean, a child would say, how did they build that chair? How did that chair get that way? And, parents will go, well, it just is, rather than, well, the earth provided a soil and water and trees grew, and then the trees were cut to build the wood, and da, 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 da. I mean, like a chair is a miracle in itself. A chair is an amazing thing. And so then when you begin to look around the room as the exercises go on, and that picture and that wall and this finger, you begin to have a whole new amazing perception of how constructed things are and how miraculous everything is. It all came right out of the ground. And then all the human beings here came out of one little egg and one little sperm. I mean, you begin to have, we just take all this for granted. You begin to have a whole new perspective about all things.
I
But
think
it forces you to contemplate that. So we want to say, number one is you sit on the chair. Number two is you close your eyes and think about what you want in life. Number three is visualize it. I mean, it's just like the course brings us right back down to ground level and helps us to rebuild our consciousness from that place of not knowing. Because when you don't know, you can learn so much more.
Right. I think that's one of the tenets of the 12-step program is to remain teachable. And I think it's so interesting how, the in the very back of the book, that story about contempt prior to investigation, like we think we already know what things mean, but that's also what the program does is it sort of deconstructs our thinking.
It invites us to try something that we don't know, that we think we do know.
Right. Yeah. A different perspective.
And
Yeah.
the people that do that are successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, right? A lot of people struggle with drinking or drugs or there's a myriad form of addiction. But in my mind, the purpose of addiction is distraction. It's distraction from the pain. And so what I really appreciated about your book was it's a very practical approach to resolving pain. And I'm going to pivot just a little bit towards your table of contents. I have so many tabs because, listen, I love a worksheet. And there were several in this, because it's all about the questions, right? It's the questions. It's like, what is this chair really? It's like, if we turn that curiosity mindset inward to ourselves, it's like, what is this feeling? Where did this feeling come from? Is this feeling even true? Right. There's
Right.
so
Or
many.
what is this body? Am I using it as a toxic waste dump? Or is it a
Right.
sacred temple? What is
Right.
this mind? And is it here to just sit here and spin around garbage all the time? Or is it here to be creative, to fulfill my mission and purpose, to show love and compassion? So, it's not just the chair, it's everything. And
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing when we make those shifts.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting how, you start with something impersonal, something outside of you, like the chair. We keep talking about the chair, but it's interesting how if you can do it with something impersonal, like the ego doesn't get really involved in that. And it's sort of, and then when the lights come
Oh,
on, you go,
oh, yes, it does. In my classes, people get really angry, like, well, I don't get what this is, I'm like, well, just observe how you're reacting to it, because that's the ego right there that says, I don't want to do this. This is
yeah,
stupid.
this is stupid. The steps are stupid. I don't want to do, yeah, so much
Right,
resistance. It's really
right.
interesting, but I love how you have the book laid out. So in the beginning, we're talking about the voice of love. So all this is taught through the lens of love and compassion, which I couldn't agree with more. You talk about control, which is a really big topic for a lot of us, as well as trust, forgiveness, respect, abundance, and you end with self-love. So so all these little tabs, I don't know if you can see it. These are, this is Wonder Woman's crown.
I love it.
It's not funny. I go, this is for
Yeah.
Donna. I'm going to use my Wonder Woman crowns because this is a wonderment. But so you talk about the two voices, right? Tell me a little bit more about how you perceive the inner dialogue of the two voices.
So when we're born, we just are. And then as time goes on and we develop the concept of this place, this world, as either good or bad, loving or fearful. And when we are shown love, that part of us is what's cultivated. But often painful things happen. It's inevitable that painful things will happen. And if that pain isn't processed, this ego forms. And it's all about a sense of a lack. There's a lack of money, there's a lack of love, there's a lack of people, there's a lack of jobs, there's a lack of whatever. And so, and also there's a lack of my ability to be able to cope with all that. So this ego forms, it's like a big iron ball, and it wants us to live in that box, that ball of protection. And so it's constantly obsessing. It never stops talking, and it's only concerned about me, 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 me. And, don't get involved or do get involved, but the motivation is always fear. What am I going to have for dinner? What am I going to do today? I like this. I don't like that. These stupid drivers, I'm mad at my husband. I'm mad at my wife. My kids aren't right. They make the student. Why did they marry this person? I mean, it just, people wonder why they don't sleep, because it's the ego going bang, 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 bang with the cymbals all night long.
It's exhausting.
This is this,
Yes.
this, and if you've ever been hurt, I'll never do that again, so that is just, we don't even realize what we eat, what we drink, who we run with, our careers, everything are based on fear. We don't realize it. We don't realize it. But once we do realize it, we can go, stop. Let's shift over here. There's another voice inside of me. The example that you learn in kindergarten, the good guy over here, the bad guy over here, there's another voice, and it's not the voice that keeps you awake at night. It's the voice that makes you feel comforted. It's a quiet, loving, still voice. And it'll say things like, maybe you want to do this, or maybe you don't want to do that. Or all of a sudden you have perfect clarity about a very complex conflict and situation. You learn to listen to that voice if you're willing to. You can learn to listen to that. And what happens is it's something will trigger you, like I gave an example earlier. Something will trigger you and your ego will go, I call it go nuclear. And it's very difficult when all that's chemicals and everything surging on to say, stop, let me hear the voice of love. But that's really what it's about, what I'm teaching in this book and what the course teaches. And there's no expectation you're going to do it perfect. But the goal is to do exactly what we were taught in the Bible, to love yourself, to love others, and to have a God that you can love. And once we learn how to access that voice, we develop a sense of peace and joy that no matter what's going on over here with the ego, we just observe it, we just notice it. There might even be some valuable information in it. It might be getting us to move, when we're stuck. But we don't do that from a place of fear. We do it from the place of love.
Yeah, I've read that in the Course in Miracles that the ego speaks first and the ego speaks loudest. But when we're trying to make decisions, it's the still quiet voice that ultimately will lead us to that place of, like, if we can make decisions from that place, it'll be peaceful. And that's, for myself, that's kind of now how, if I'm on the right track or not. And I just want to read this line from chapter 1. The most important guidance you will ever receive is deep within. Listen to the voice of love. That is your path to miracles.
Yes.
I love that.
Thank
So
you.
powerful. I want to continue on.
And
just
we've
a
given
little.
all our power out there. And the teachers, the greatest teachers, need to remind us, like Jesus did, that the power is in you. And to access that from within you, we don't need to assign our lives over to caretakers and people that are teaching us this. The point of learning anything, it's like now, I can use a calculator, but I'd rather learn math and then use the calculator, because there's something missing. And if I lose my calculator, I can't add or subtract. So it's the same thing when we give our power over to authority figures who are experts, including me. I don't want anyone to give their power over to me other than to help them learn how to do this themselves. And that's why a book is so effective, because they don't even have to know me. I had one person call and demand that I be her therapist, and she couldn't afford to pay me. And it's not about the money. It's just about, you don't need a therapist. Your therapist is within you. Your therapist is that voice, that still small voice. So don't give me the authority to be able to heal you, especially when you've said you've tried everything and done everything. You've tried recovery. You didn't like this. You didn't like that. Da, da, da. I'm not going to be any different. Access your inner guide who will give you 100% correct information and guidance. Use the books, use the teachers, use the tools to learn how to access that part of yourself.
Yeah, that's, I could see just from what you told me that's seeking outside of yourself for the solution, but the solution is always internal. And that kind of is a
It's
good
another
segue.
addiction for me, anyhow. I went all over the
Oh,
world on a
yeah.
spiritual quest.
100%. I was actually thinking of starting a second podcast called The Self-Help Junkie, because I'm, I read this information, I get all excited. Do I apply it? Or, sometimes, but it's like, if I just need to find the one thing, what is the one thing I'm missing?
Yourself.
Myself. It's very confusing. But this is a great segue into chapter 2, which is about control. And the first line I had to highlight was, the most important person you will ever control is yourself, which isn't that the truth, right? It's like, know yourself, but it's like, but we also have like this mechanism of self-sabotage, that comes into play. And in my mind, it's about our subconscious beliefs that, we have like this homeostasis sort of level that we're this baseline that we're comfortable at. And so often I see people healing and they start to change their lives and they're not comfortable with this new level and they self-sabotage. But it really is about, how do we control ourselves when we're not comfortable sort of going to the next level? What do you think that's about?
Just say that, how comfortable we are when.
Yeah, we try to go to the next level, but we're not really comfortable there. So we tend to self-sabotage. It's like that default mode network that we have. It's like there's some sort of internal belief system that it's like, I'm not worthy. So it's almost like,
Well,
if you're
that's just the fear, listening to the voice of fear. There's a whole lot of conversation right now about imposter syndrome. And so there's two components to that. One, if I am an imposter, I could do something about it. So,
Right.
if there's some inadequacies in my skill set at work or in a relationship, it's so beautiful. There's no lack of information available to fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if I have prepared myself for whatever, I can always learn and grow, but I can also accept the fact that I'm never going to know it all, and that's okay. And that's why there's resources. So in terms of feeling so inadequate, if we're sourcing from the fear, we're never going to feel adequate. If we're sourcing from that place of love and being okay with being human and being okay that I'm okay just the way I am, I'm willing to grow, I'm willing to learn. One of my books is Learn, Grow, Forgive. It's okay to make mistakes as long as I'm juicing those mistakes for personal growth. And so when we begin to do this, then we just become a part of humanity, and we don't need to be greater than or less than anybody else. We're
I think that
comfortable.
goes back to the whole idea of self-love, who am I? What do I deserve? What am I capable of? And I think early sobriety is about sort of coming up with a new identity. Like before I got sober, I was the wild party girl. And when I got sober, I was like, well, who am I now? And I think that question of who am I is a question that comes up over and over again through different stages of life. But if we come from that place of self-love, then instead of fear, then that's something that we can we're always evolving. And so we can continue to evolve in a positive way. But tell me a little bit more about what you felt was really important for people to know about self-control.
Well, we spend so much time trying to control everything. We try to control people. We try to control situations. We don't like it if the weather's not like we wanted it to be. We don't like it if the plane cancels. We don't like it if people we love aren't acting the way we think they should act. What I'm saying here is, whoa, what a waste of energy. Transfer all that effort and energy back into controlling yourself and your own reactions to things. And let people in situations we can't look. If we could see everything that's happening all the time, we would understand why sometimes things happen that we don't like. It's clearly would be for our highest good if we could see all that, but we can't see that. And so if we could come from love and use all our energy to try and love and appreciate. I'm not talking about if you see someone on the street getting beaten up, that you just sit there and send love vibes. No, I'm not saying that, but you would approach that situation with love. And you wouldn't try to convince them to do anything other than to stop hurting each other and intervene in that respect. Even the greatest prophets of all times did interventions to help people from being harmed and hurt, of course. But in terms of our daily living, we're not, we'll justify not paying bills, let's say, or not showing up on time, or not being our word, or not, canceling at the last, all kinds of things, not canceling at work, just many, many things. And sometimes we do that in retaliation to something we don't like. I'm suggesting stop all that and learn how to put all your effort into making yourself happy with yourself, reparenting yourself, loving yourself, controlling your own instincts and drives and your own impulses. Once you can master that, you're going to find a great deal of joy within you. And you won't need to worry about what anybody else is doing. You'll just accept it. And I don't mean like accept it. I mean, that's just their life and they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love this line in your book. You are the master of your universe, but you need help from the universe to master yourself. And I think that's accessing the power of love, right? We access the power of love so that we don't respond the way we always have, that leads to bad things, let's say. But asking for help is so important.
Oh, it's so important. And to understand that the universe is collaborating to help you. And if it's not helping you, it's not the right collaboration. when I wrote my book, Exit the Maze, we had self-published it, and then I entered it through the voice said, put it in some contests because people had read it and really liked it, and it wound up winning over 23 book awards.
Wow.
And so I was sharing that with a friend, a new friend, by the way, and she said, oh, you should meet my friend who's a book agent. And out of that came a publisher who not only wanted to publish The Healing Moment, but wanted to revise the original edition of Exit the Maze. So this is the collaboration that the universe was willing to provide me. But if I had never shared that with this new friend, who I never expected to meet either, that would not have happened. But I can give you many, many, many situations in my life where I wasn't trying to make anything happen. I allowed it to happen.
No, that's a
And
beautiful
the miracles
point.
came out of that.
Yeah, they say in the Course in Miracles, it says that miracles are natural, and when they're not happening, something's out of alignment. Love that.
Yes.
Let's see, we only have a little bit of time left. There was so much to talk about. I mean, we talk about learning how to trust yourself. Can we talk a little bit about forgiveness? Because I feel like I hear a lot from, men too, but a lot of women have a lot of self-judgment. I feel like the standards for women are just impossible. You can't be too fat, too thin, don't be angry, don't be too successful, don't be dependent on anyone else. We're
Well,
living
the
this.
same is true for men. You can't be too rich or you can't be too powerful. And if you are too rich and too powerful, you better do this, you better do that. Or if you're not rich and powerful enough, don't expect to get this. And I mean, it's all crazy.
It's all crazy. That's true. That's fair. It's all crazy. But I'm a woman, so I'm self-centered. I'm thinking about me, Donna. I'm thinking
At
about
least
me.
you know.
Yeah, I feel like most of the listeners are women too. I'm not really sure. People, the homeboys don't reach out to me that much. But I do want to talk about self-forgiveness because for everyone, let's just say everyone, because in the beginning of recovery, there's so much shame. Right. And I think what is missing is this acknowledgement that trauma actually causes us to dissociate from our pain. But it's still there. It's like a toxic barrel that's planted in our minds and our hearts, and it leaches
Ego.
out. Yeah, ego. And so it's still there, but a lot of people are unaware that they are carrying all this pain, right? All this trauma. And so it manifests in different kinds of addiction. And the addictions lead us to behave badly. I'll say I behaved badly, and I was doing things my mama did not approve of. And so I had I was carrying a lot of shame. And I feel like that was the message of Jesus, was to forgive. Right. So can you sort of hit some highlights of how do we actually forgive ourselves?
Well, one of my only complaint with the recovery programs is that, and all of them do it, they override the process of acknowledging trauma
Mm-hmm.
and what to do about it. And in fact, it's just the opposite. If you just, look at your role in things, or you change your mind about how you feel about it, which is a cognitive approach, basically, perceive it differently, then you will be okay. And that's the ultimate goal for sure. But what happens, if someone has an addiction that has been covering up their pain and trauma, and not everybody with addiction has had that kind of pain and trauma, by the way, but most have. And then you're told, just look at your role in it. That really that's a reenactment of the trauma. And I think that's why the spinoff of adult children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families happened, because the regular program does not address that. And it needs to be addressed, because you cannot say that a 3-year-old had a role in being sexually abused. You just can't do that. I mean, there's just no way around that. You can't say that a 5-year-old little boy who forgot to, pick up his boots and got knocked across the room had a role in that. I mean, that's just insanity. So, but that's exactly, or to change your perception, and be more cognitively advanced in your thinking about this. I mean, that's just re-abusing the person who was already abused. And that's, you can stay sober, but the recovery is going to be limited because it's never going to make sense. So what I'm saying in forgiveness is that that's the end part of the grieving process. It's the end part of acknowledging the pain, experiencing the pain, giving yourself permission to revisit those moments in time. And all of my books have the built-in workbooks. So these exercises are in there of how to access that early pain and mourn it and grieve it. And whether it's the anger or the sorrow or whatever, because then you're externalizing it. And once you do that, you're creating the space for the love to come into that formerly terrorized place, or that toxic shame place. For me, I had a lot of abuse in childhood, and I can actually say I'm now grateful for having had those experiences because they've given me so much insight into helping other people. And I also was able to understand why I exhibited some of those behaviors with my own child when I was married and divorced at 18 years old with a 2-year-old. So, it's an integration of all these experiences and finding meaning. And once we can do that, then we can forgive, that we can begin that forgiveness process, because we have a much deeper and richer understanding of ourselves as humans, that our parents are humans, that they were probably treating us the same way they had been treated. You only know what you know. And so now we have so many more resources available in parenting and things like that, but years ago we didn't. So this is often intergenerational. So to be able to forgive intergenerational sins and to forgive our own, and to recognize that we are human, we make mistakes, people make mistakes. There is nothing that can't be forgiven. With some things take longer than others, and that's okay. If your fifth grade boyfriend broke up with you and you still feel resentful, that's easier to forgive than if your mother was murdered, let's say, or your brother or sister, was run over by a drunk driver or something like that. So, and same thing for ourselves. Some of our sins that we call sins are harder to forgive. The Course in Miracles says there is no sins, there's only mistakes. So let's use the word mistake. It's a much healthier word. But the point is that no matter what's happened, we can forgive. And at the root of all resentment, there is a place in us that said, maybe if I would have been smarter, or I even remember as 5-year-olds, but what am I doing to cause this? At the root of all resentment is that something inside of us hasn't forgiven ourselves. So once we do, we release all that. It's like carrying around all this baggage of toxic energy, and it starts to seep out of the suitcases, and then the suitcases are gone, and then it's just us in our natural state, which is like that newborn baby coming into the world. We learn how to love ourselves, we learn how to be gentle with ourselves and others, and we feel much happier. We don't have to carry around that burden of resentment anymore. We can forgive and even find meaning in those experiences.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. The mourning and the grieving, the loss of what could have been or what should have been. And grief is an interesting thing in the sense that, like, we really can't control it. We can allow it, and we can ask for support to deal with it. But that makes so much sense to me, that the mourning and the grieving has to sort of run its course before we can forgive, like, even ourselves for
Any
things that
wound
we
has to
did.
be, if it's filling up with toxins, you have to let that toxin out.
Yeah.
Any organ that's damaged has to be healed. So when our heart is wounded, we have to acknowledge that it's wounded and let all that pain ooze out of it so that it can be restored to the beautiful, loving heart that it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And I love the idea of just giving it time and asking for help, and just releasing all that resentment. It's interesting because I've been through the 12 steps many times, and in that 4-step process of the self-examination, man, and I've been on the other end of that, where I'm facilitating for somebody else, and they do have those early childhood experiences where they don't have a role. And I recently interviewed Dr. David Spiegel, and he was talking about, he's a psychiatrist out of Stanford who utilizes hypnosis. And I said, why do victims of sexual abuse have so much shame? And he explained it like that in our psyche, we want to feel like we have control, like we want to avoid this idea of powerlessness so much that we often take inappropriate responsibility, right? And so many times I'm working with another woman, I'm like, you had no part in that. You truly were a victim, right? There is no, and so it's about acknowledging I'm taking responsibility for something that's not mine, and I think that the idea of responsibility is so confusing. Like we take inappropriate responsibility for others, but we don't take responsibility for ourselves. And I think that's why it's so important to we do need others to sometimes help us sort things out, because it's that idea that you can't read the label from inside the jar, right? It's easier for
Right.
it's easier for somebody else to be objective, maybe a little more objective about our experience to help us sort of kind of guide through
The
those
label's
little
inside,
tropes.
take it out so you can read it.
Right?
Something that simple sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. But no, this is we're at our time, and I'm just gonna say we should just leave them wanting more, because there's so much more in this book that was so good. Like we talked about, there's um learning about abundance, which I think is really important to acknowledge that how much abundance that is all around us. You have many lessons in the book about respect. And then we should really highlight that the end of the book is about actually finding that self-love that we talked about that was so important. So very practical.
There's even a little appendix in there, 77 ways to self-love.
Ooh, girl, I missed that. I'm gonna have to go back and look at that one. Um, but listen, I just want to thank you for your time today. So
Thank
many
you.
amazing things to consider from our conversation today, but I just want to encourage everyone to get the book, The Healing Moment, 7 Paths to
I would
Turn
love people
Messes into Miracles.
to email me www.drdonnamarks.com with any questions or comments. And we have all kinds of resources available on the website, and all the books can be, one click purchase right there too. But they're also available on Barnes and Noble and the stores. They will order whatever you want if they don't already have it, and Amazon, and Simon Schuster has it listed on their website as well.
Yeah, it's so important. And thank you so much for being open to people's questions. I mean, a lot of times people reach out to me and they're like, how do I get a hold of this person? How do I? So thank you for making yourself available to the listeners, and thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me on your show.
We'll talk again soon. Thanks so much.
Great.